Nobody clapped for the pitcher. Not at first. The stadium held its silence the way a room holds its breath before something irreversible happens. 47,000 people. And not one of them made a sound. Then it started. Slowly. One pair of hands from somewhere in the third base line. Then another. Then the entire opposing dugout, men who had spent 9 innings trying to stop him, rose to their feet. One by one. Like dominoes falling in reverse. They weren't clapping because their team won. They lost. They were clapping because they had just witnessed something that none of them, not the veterans with 20 years in the league, not the coaches who had seen thousands of games, not the broadcasters who had been calling baseball since before some of these players were born, had ever seen before. Shohei Ohtani had just done it again. And this time, the game itself didn't know how to respond. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened on this night, you have to understand what the stakes were before the first pitch was even thrown. This was not a random Tuesday in April. This was not a game that could be filed away under impressive performance and forgotten by morning. This was Ohtani's return to the mound after weeks away. This was the moment the Dodgers had been carefully managing, deliberately protecting, intentionally building toward. And on his second pitch back, not his second inning, not his second start, his second pitch of the entire evening, the ball left his hand with the kind of authority that makes scouts put their notebooks down. The batter never had a chance. But that wasn't even the headline. Not yet. The headline came in the first at-bat of the game. Ohtani stepped into the batter's box before he ever touched the mound. That's the thing about him that still confuses the sport. He doesn't arrive as a pitcher who hits. He doesn't arrive as a hitter who pitches. He arrives as both, simultaneously, completely, without compromise. And the moment he digs his back foot into the dirt of the batter's box, every pitcher on the opposing side understands something uncomfortable. The man they are about to face on the mound later today is standing 60 feet away from them right now, reading their tendencies, cataloging their approach, filing it all away. The first pitch came in. Ohtani watched it. The second pitch came in. He didn't watch that one. The bat connected with the kind of sound that doesn't need a radar gun to be understood. The ball rose at an angle that left no room for hope on the fielder's part. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. His 14th home run of the season. And for those keeping count at home, 3 consecutive games. 3 games in a row. A man who had just returned from time away from the mound. A man whose every pitch count was being monitored, whose every inning was being rationed like something precious and finite. That man had now homered in 3 straight games. The Dodgers' dugout erupted. But across the diamond, in the opposing dugout, there was a different kind of reaction. A few heads shook. A few eyes went to the sky. Not in anger. In something closer to disbelief. This was only the beginning of the night. And somehow, everyone already knew it. When Ohtani took the mound, the stadium shifted into a different register. There is a specific kind of quiet that descends when Ohtani pitches. It is not the quiet of boredom. It is not the quiet of a low-scoring, forgettable game. It is the quiet of an audience leaning forward. Of people not wanting to miss a single detail. Of a crowd that understands, even if they can't articulate why, that they are watching something that will be replayed, debated, and remembered. The first inning was clean. The second inning was cleaner. By the third, the opposing batters were starting to do the math. His stuff was not just sharp. It was sharp in the way it had been before the break, before the rest, before the careful management of his innings. He had come back with everything intact. And then came the inning that changed everything. The perfect game was alive. Through 6 innings, not a single opposing batter had reached base. No hits. No walks. No errors. No hit batsman. 21 batters faced. 21 batters retired. The stadium knew it. The broadcast knew it. The Dodgers dugout knew it, and they had gone silent in that superstitious way baseball teams go silent when something sacred is happening. No one said the words. You don't say the words. And then came Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman is not a batter you want to see in that situation. He is not the kind of hitter who gets rattled by the moment, who shrinks under the weight of what's at stake for the pitcher. He has been in too many important games. He has faced too many important pitches. And on this night, he stood in against Ohtani with everything on the line. The count worked. The at-bat extended. Ohtani threw pitches that would have retired most hitters in the league. Freeman fouled them off. Extended the at-bat. Made him work. And then, on the pitch that was supposed to end it all, Freeman got the barrel on it. The hit was clean. Into left center. No doubt. Just like that, the perfect game was gone. The no-hitter was gone. Back-to-back on the same swing of the bat. In the Dodgers dugout, shoulders dropped. Not dramatically. Just slightly. The way they do when something beautiful is interrupted by something inevitable. The broadcast went quiet for a moment. 47,000 people let out a collective exhale that sounded almost like grief. But Ohtani stood on the mound and did something that said everything about who he is. He didn't stare at the outfield. He didn't shake his head. He didn't look at the dugout for comfort. He took a breath. He turned back to the rubber. He got the ball back from the catcher. And he retired the next 3 batters without incident. That is the part of the story that doesn't fit neatly into the highlight reel. Anyone can dominate when everything is going right. Anyone can look like a generational talent when the perfect game is alive and the crowd is on its feet for all the right reasons. The real test is what happens in the inning after the perfect game dies. In the moment after the record slips away. In the space between heartbreak and the next pitch. Ohtani came through 7 innings total. He allowed 1 hit. He struck out 11. His pitch count was managed, as it always is now. The Dodgers are not in the business of giving away his arm for a single regular season narrative, no matter how beautiful that narrative might have been. When he walked off the mound after the 7th inning, the standing ovation started. But this time, something different happened. The opposing dugout stood up. This almost never happens in baseball. The culture of the sport doesn't make room for it easily. There is competition and there is respect, and those two things rarely occupy the same gesture at the same time. But on this night, the players who had spent 9 innings trying to do the one thing that baseball demands, beat the other team, set that aside for 30 seconds. They stood. They applauded. They acknowledged what they had seen. One veteran outfielder, who had been in the league for over a decade, was asked about it after the game. He didn't have an elaborate answer. He looked at the reporter with the expression of someone who had already thought about this on the walk back to the clubhouse and hadn't arrived at anything better than the obvious. He just does things that make you forget you're supposed to be competing against him. That was his answer. He didn't add anything to it. He didn't need to. In the visiting clubhouse after the game, the mood was the specific combination of frustration and awe that only Ohtani seems capable of producing. They had lost. The scoreboard made that clear. But the conversation in front of the microphones didn't stay on the loss for long. Their manager sat at the table with the expression of someone who had just finished writing a book report on a subject he deeply admired and deeply wished he didn't have to write about. He was asked, "At what point did you realize tonight was going to be one of those nights?" He didn't hesitate. The second pitch of the game. He was already locked in. When a hitter is that ready on the second pitch, that relaxed, that certain, it tells you something. And then he went to the mound and he brought the same thing with him. That's not normal. That's not something you prepare a game plan for. You can prepare for a good pitcher or a good hitter. When he's both on the same night, at that level, you're just trying to minimize the damage. He paused. Looked at the table. And we didn't even do that very well. The room let that sit for a moment. Then someone asked about Freeman's hit. About whether it felt like a turning point, a moment of relief for the team, a crack in the armor. The manager almost smiled. But not quite. Freddie got a hit. That's true. And Freddie getting a hit is never an accident, he's one of the best hitters in this league for a reason. But Ohtani retired the next 3 men like it didn't affect him at all. So yes, the perfect game ended. But the performance didn't. And honestly, at that point, we were just hoping to keep the score respectable. On the other side of the building, Dave Roberts answered questions with the measured calm of someone who had long since accepted that he was managing a player the sport wasn't built to accommodate. He was asked whether he had considered letting Ohtani go for the complete game once the no-hitter was still intact deep into the game. Roberts nodded slowly. The way he nods when the answer is more complicated than the question implies. We talked about it. Of course we talked about it. When you're watching something like that happen in real time, every instinct tells you to let it breathe. But we have a responsibility that goes beyond one game, one night, one historic performance. Shohei's health is a long-term commitment. And he understood that too. He didn't push back. He trusted the process. He let that settle before continuing. What he did tonight, 7 innings, 1 hit, 11 strikeouts, a home run to start the game, that is already more than enough. That is already something people are going to talk about for a long time. We don't need to chase the ending. The night told its own story. And it did. It told the story of a player who returned from rest not tentatively, not cautiously, not with the careful energy of someone easing back into something, but with the full force of someone who had been waiting. Who had used the time not to recover from something but to prepare for something. 14 home runs. 3 consecutive games. 7 innings. 11 strikeouts. 1 hit surrendered. And an opposing dugout, standing. The rules didn't write that story. The contract didn't write that story. The marketing campaigns and the broadcast packages and the magazine covers didn't write that story. Ohtani wrote it. On his second pitch back. Before anyone in the stadium had finished their first drink of the evening. And when the last out was recorded and the night was over and 47,000 people walked out into the parking lot with the quiet look of people who had just seen something they would try to describe to others and fail, nobody needed to be told that they had witnessed something rare. They already knew. Baseball already knew. The standing ovation said so.